Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining me for my presentation on absolute circularity for the wine industry. I have a number of completely new concepts to share, things I've been working on for several months, and I really do hope that you will post questions during the presentation, and I'm looking forward to answering those at the end. So without further ado, I will kick off. What do we need to address? What is it that we are really going to talk about this afternoon? First of all, why are businesses adopting models for circular economy? Then what do we mean by absolute circularity? This is the title of my talk and something I've been pondering and working on for quite a long time, and absolute circularity is definitely the way forward. Then looking, in the wine industry in particular, where do we see circular economy advances already leading the way? And then finally, what do we as an industry need to do to turn this relative circularity into absolute? So I'm not just here to decry the wine industry or to worry about the planet, because I think there are many, many things we can do. And I think the wine industry can certainly be central in addressing these issues and teaching other industries how to move forward. So I think, many of you will have seen circular economy models. There are specific ones for different industries, but this is a good one. And I don't know the source, to be honest, but I found this quite useful for looking at the wine industry. Generally, we're not mining or extracting oil. We're sort of, we're making bottles generally, or at least bag in boxes, but we source, we convert that. Obviously we've got agriculture, we've got, all kinds of fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides that, we really need to eliminate. But then we've got distribution and warehousing, retailing, we've got the consumption. And then ideally, after collection, sorting, we shouldn't even be recycling. We should be washing, reprocessing, and getting those same bits of packaging and everything else back into circulation. And we'll talk about that a bit more later. So why is it that suddenly this term circular economy has become so exciting? And, why is my desire to have absolute circularity? Well, one of the things that brands love is the fact that circular economy models reduce costs and they can boost sales and revenue and profits. So if you look at some major fashion brands, they're already very focused on circularity because they want to make more money and waste less. And this is no bad thing. Very often, anybody who's in business realizes you do not have business without a profitable model. Only a charity can continue to lose and invest and invest. But also, there is a low cost and abundance of what people still call waste. I no longer call it waste. I call it resource, recursos naturales for any Spanish speakers. We have all of this abundance of things that nature has given us. So we have algae that we can use for packaging. We have biomaterials from bacterial processes that we can use to print biofilms. And this is like crazy science fiction, but this is already happening. People are printing all kinds of stuff in 3D. And then, absolutely obvious for the wine industry, we have huge amounts of agri-waste. So we have wheat waste for primary and transit packaging, but we have grape waste, we have vine waste, we have pomace, we have all kinds of vinasse, we have all these things that we can use and turn into resource. But one of the major really the major trigger, the thing that's making businesses think about circularity as legislation and avoiding taxes. I mean, nobody likes to pay tax. It's like, if there's one thing that you look back through history, what has changed many, bits of history is taxes and avoiding paying those taxes. You have the EU, who've already published over a year ago their policy document on products in the circular economy. You have people in the US and lawmakers throughout the US looking at extended producer responsibility. And I will explain a bit more about these. If you're not part of the circular economy conversation right now, you will need to be. And then, DEFRA, the Department of Environment in the UK, introducing a deposit return scheme, which will grow across all packaging. The second consultation took place just 3 months ago, but this is all coming into play. So let me just take you through those very quickly before I go on to the exciting and interesting stuff that's happening in wine. The product environmental footprint, I think, is the most kind of overreaching, and the thing that brands and manufacturers and retailers need to think most about. It's a new method for measuring sustainability performance, developed by the European Commission in cooperation with some of the foremost experts in sustainability alongside the companies. And the aim is to improve the validity and comparability of the environmental performance evaluation compared to existing methods. That's quite a mouthful, quite difficult to get your head round and get your teeth round to say it, but actually super important, because we will be measuring everything from the minute that you start growing grapes, to the pressing, to the bottling, to the distribution, to the retail, to the consumption, to the bottle collection, to reprocessing, hopefully. And if you don't reprocess, you will be penalized with great taxes. And this is something which will work. It's worked every time in history. Once people start to talk about tax, manufacturers reformulate, rethink, reconfigure the whole ecosystem in order to avoid that. Beyond that, and kind of even sooner, is the extended producer responsibility, which is coming into Europe, into the US, and wherever you can think of, it will be coming. It's a way of governments shifting the cost of collecting household waste away from taxpayers and onto producers. And this is in the hope of delivering a more circular economy for packaging, where greater quantities of recyclable waste are reprocessed into high quality secondary resources. Now, in a way, if you're the producer and you're suddenly getting an extra cost, the best way to cover that is to pass it right back to the taxpayer. But at least there's a clarity and a transparency about who is responsible for actually doing this work, which right now is done by local councils, by governments, and not done by producers. And finally, I think the one that people probably know the best is the deposit return scheme. This is very popular and they're happening all over the world. Just this week, Ireland has been announcing their deposit return scheme. Here in the UK, we actually operate individually. Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England are all separate countries when it comes to waste management and circular economy. But Scotland is already very advanced in DRS, deposit return scheme. In England, it's coming along, but pretty slowly. And, there are countries like the Nordics or Germany where this is absolutely the most standard thing in the world that you've always had. And, it did used to exist in the UK and disappeared. So something that's coming back. But, just overall, it's important to understand that refill and reuse is part of government thinking across all sectors, not just drinks and beverages. So in France, the government's looking for retailers to have 20% refill options in retail within the next few years. So this is not a kind of future wish, but something that they are insisting happens. The brands and the retailers have reacted quite in shock and in horror, but it's happening, and they will definitely find ways of making it happen. In Germany, more recently, we have seen the federal environment minister basically insisting that in the future that restaurants, whether they be, your big chain fast food restaurants or your single outlets, will have to offer reusable containers for drinks and meals to take away. And more importantly, these must be at the same price as the existing throwaway packaging. So this is saying to, a whole sector within HoReCa, you must do reuse, refill, and you mustn't charge more for it. You must absorb those costs. So again, will they put the price of everything up? Generally, let's wait and see. But it's all coming, and governments everywhere are very excited about not being responsible for waste. So that's a little bit about why people are moving into circular economy and circularity. But what do we mean by absolute circularity, this sort of concept that I really want to push home? Well, first of all, absolute circularity is what I would call a higher level circularity. It's the opposite to relative circularity. So there's a fully closed loop where there's no escape of resource. If you put 100 kilos into the loop, which is your system that we saw at the beginning, you get out 100 kilos. There is no loss. Right now with much of what we do, we put in X kilos and we get half or a quarter of those kilos back. I mean, there are some systems that we have, particularly in livestock, where we put 100 kilos in and we get 1 kilo back. We get like 1% of the input. That is definitely not circular. And most modern manufacturer, and the wine industry is no different, has lots of holes in the loop and resources are escaping constantly. So the fundamental idea is very simple. Absolute circularity is genuine circularity. It is, if you just look at it from a very objective point of view, there is no question of it. What we refer to as relative circularity refers to something being more circular than it was before. And it may not be circular. It may have a 20% loss, a 40% loss, a 99% loss from the loop. So sure, it's relatively circular, but it's not absolutely circular. And this absolute circularity is achieved when the practice or operation causes zero environmental impact, the resource input is extracted with zero loss. It's basically a loop where nothing escapes. And just imagine we could have a loop where we put in 100 kilos and we take out 120 kilos. That would really be the ultimate aim. And we can look at this happening in the world of energy, where less is put in than comes out. And this is kind of where lots of people are very excited. And then also in food, we are looking within the next 5 years at creating food out of thin air, literally taking air, which is full of obviously, oxygen and nitrogen and all carbon dioxide and everything, and turning that into protein. That's kind of crazy, but it's coming. So we need to think, if that's happening, how on earth do we put that kind of thinking into the wine industry? So to measure, all of this needs to be measured, absolute circularity. We need what's known as the absolute environmental assessment. So instead of comparing the environmental aspects or impacts of different modes of transport to each other, i.e. a diesel truck, an electric truck, a biofuel truck, you have to compare them to all the external list of possibilities. So here, you want to export by truck. You have an electric truck for transporting crates or barrels, but you can't compare trucks with trucks in absolute circularity. It's so tough. You have to compare all the potential methods of transporting wine. So that includes, bicycles, horses, humans, rivers, you name it. That is what absolute circularity is about. So it's a sort of super high gold standard, but that's where we're moving to. We can't just carry on being a little bit better. That is not gonna help us with the climate crisis. So moving on to something more pleasant and a little bit more optimistic, there are circular economy advances in the drinks industry. So, I mean, the absolute key question that any wine maker has is, can we get shoppers to bring their bottles for refill? Is there a way of getting this resource back? And the good answer is yes, there is. And sometimes there is no resource in the first place. So there's a company called Borough Wines based in London who I follow very closely. They have lots of different solutions. They are really aiming to be, sustainability and circular champions. One of them is their bottle return scheme. So having asked, can you get the bottles back? Yes, they can. I mean, just think about HoReCa in Britain alone. We are talking about 129,000 tons of glass going into refill from UK HoReCa, which is quite a figure, given that glass is hard-wearing, lasts for centuries, inert, does the perfect job. What on earth are we doing? So they have other alternatives as well, not just getting the glass back, but they have things like VinoTap, which is a 10-litre stainless steel refill keg system, zero waste, no cardboard, no internal bag, alternative to bag in box. And then they've got their wine on tap, which is again via a keg system. Kegs are great. Refillable kegs, obviously used by the beer industry, super sustainable in that respect because they're coming back. They're going round and round and round. There is nothing more circular. So let's use it for wine. But then we have, people doing this all around the world. Let's zoom over now to Asia and look at companies like EcoSpirits. It's the world's first low carbon, low waste spirits distribution technology. And again, anything you can do for spirits or beer, you can pretty much do for wine, as long as you don't think, oh my God, I'm a wine producer, I need to do what I've done for generations. You have to think outside the box because we all have to reduce our carbon footprint. There is no other solution. So here's an example of a bar in Hong Kong called Penicillin, which is being serviced by EcoSpirits. And you can sort of see, it looks cool, it looks trendy, but more than anything, you've got a very ambitious beverage program, and it's operating. It's not fantasy. It's actually working and making people a profit. But let's go back to wine just for a second. Here's a good friend of mine who I've known for 2 decades already, based in Lisbon, with his company Wine Ventures. And he's already doing and has been thinking about this for more than 2 decades. He came from the beer industry, came into wine, and said, why aren't we doing, great quality wines in keg? So this is all done by grape type. You've got Arinto, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Alicante Bouschet, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah, and Touriga Nacional. So you've got all those different grapes, 8 different varietals, all coming in keg. And you've got, the brand name Crime of the Century, which I totally love. If you're going to do something, talk about it, be proud about it. And it's also circularity, reducing costs. What could be better than making a fast serve, premium wine consumption, and lower cost circularity? And then, let's go to the States. We've got a number of these companies already operating. I was had the pleasure of meeting Conscious Container last week. Again, 7 years in the making, big tech platform, great trial customers from the beer industry, but moving into wines. Consumers buy and drink their favorite drinks from refillable glass. They collect the refillable bottles, or partners drop off refillable bottles at the processing center. Those are then washed, sorted, and inspected, and then they go back. They are sold to the beverage companies that began with them in the first place, and that's up and running. Again, 2021. This is the year that this is really scaling up. Super interesting. But not everyone can do all of these great things. Not everybody has got the capacity, the money, the investment to do all of this. So, what else can operate? Many other industries are unable to accommodate circular practices within their existing businesses, so they outsource. So what we're seeing is the birth of a number of companies who will do the circularity for you, and you can have a full circular economy model without businesses having to recruit or make any internal changes to process. So fashion is a great example. You see all these fashion brands doing renting and recycling and upcycling, but they're not actually doing it. This is all being done by third parties. So, the wine business, we're beginning to see, particularly in the US, and I think also in the UK, things are coming very quickly. My knowledge of other countries and this happening, probably not so great, but yeah, I would say we're seeing these examples in Portugal and Asia. But this is something that has to happen. But also consultancy and training. There are people who have been doing this for years. So a company like Unpackaged, they will come into your company, come into your brand, and they will basically train you on developing a circular system. So, Google this, look these people up, look at what they're doing, look what you can do, and how you basically tailor that for your own operations. So finally, before I answer the questions that are coming in, where do we need to go next to turn relative into absolute? So I've really got 4 major points, 4 bullet points I wanted to share. So, we need surprising innovation. We don't need tiny changes. We don't need a little bit of improvement. That will not get us where we need to go as an industry. We have to radically improve the footprint of the industry. We have to radically improve the way that the transparency, and understand all the things that we do, all of these things that we've been doing for centuries, and just saying, is that the right way for 2021, 2025? Is it the right way for my grandkids? How do we do this within viticulture, within processing and supply chain? And here are my starter thoughts. 1, reimagine waste on the vineyard. Turn the annual 12 million tons of pomace into resource. Abandon vermicomposting and see pomace and other winery waste as resource for boxes, labels, and who knows what else. I mean, we can print labels today using grape waste. That, as long as it's dry, you can turn agri-waste into paper. So we just need to make sure that whatever we do, we can dry it out. All packaging to be refill. Wave goodbye to linear throwaway bottles. Why are we throwing away such beautiful bottles? It's dumb. We don't need to. And then put more back into the power grid than you extract. Let's really push our own governments to give us more renewable electricity. Let's put in the solar panels. Let's use, whatever we can, and lower our reliance on fossil fuels. And finally, and for me, just as important, there's no point in having a planet without all of the biodiversity, without pollinators, without mammals, without amphibians. We are losing all of our amphibians as a planet. It's ridiculous. We need to focus on mega biodiversity, not just on your vineyard, but across your region, and then we'll be on the right track. This is super important. I'm replanting my whole garden to encourage pollinators, butterflies, bumblebees, damselflies, which will then bring in more birds. We need to do this on every bit of land and break up the concrete and do it as well. So thank you so much for listening in. I can see some questions have come in already. So bear with me and I will come to your questions. Right. So thank you very much. Let me tackle the questions one by one. The first one is perfect circularity a completely closed system? Absolutely, yeah. So we talk about closing the loop. And really the best loop is one that's completely closed. So whatever goes in, all this stuff going around the circle comes back in at the other end. So absolutely, it's a perfect circle, absolute circularity. That's a great way of describing it. Oh, goodness me. The next one is a hard one. So it says, if there were no externalities, choosing the most profitable solution is also choosing the one with the highest new benefits. Absolutely. If you are doing circularity properly, you will be saving money. You will be making more profit and spending less. So this is absolutely vital. Let's try and make the right decisions. Let's make them viable financially, because then they will continue. Then they will continue on. Next one, moving on quickly. Do you think there'll be a harmonized industry standard to measure sustainability so that consumers will understand more easily? Interestingly, I've been following something for about 2 years, a new labeling system which has 4 quadrants that looks at things like pesticide usage, water usage, footprint, and biodiversity. It measures those 4 aspects. And it's being developed now by a company, a profitable company, a commercial company, Mondra, Mondra, who are doing this new sort of carbon footprint, bio footprint, eco, everything measured in one label. It's all very visual. So from a design point of view, it's great because you can see the colors. And I think that should be the new standard from Mondra. And I'm going to campaign and talk to people about it till I can, to make sure that becomes part and parcel of the new labeling system. What is Borough Wines doing with their propellant CO2? I don't know. I will ask. So I'm sure they have a very good answer, but I don't know the answer. So I will actually reach out to them and ask. And then the final question, I don't really know the answer to, so I'm going to leave it there. And I think it's time for me to wrap up anyway. So thank you so much for being here with us. And I hope I've answered those questions as well as I can, and look forward to talking again. Always contact me on Twitter at Panfo, Paanfo, or at Circuthon, Circuthon, on Twitter, on LinkedIn. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.